So if you have paid any attention to the news, if you have, don't live under a rock, you have probably heard something about the lawsuit or the settlement by the National Association of Realtors for $418 million that was announced on Friday. And it is it is going to be, not probably, the biggest change that we have seen in the industry in over a century. um, Big ramifications in terms of how commissions are handled and how agents respond. I will say that I honestly feel like our industry is partially at fault in terms of the professionalism and how we handled and explained to the consumer how we failed to represent our worth and our professionalism, to educate the consumer. But this lawsuit is fraught with issues. And as someone, I'm going on my 28th year in this industry. I've been here since the beginning, almost the beginning of buyer agency. There's a lot of things to dissect, and I wanted to dive into that today, but I'm not going to do it alone. I'm not going to do it alone. So I'm on the East Coast, Plymouth, Massachusetts, representing the East Coast, and I have a friend that I'm pulling in from West Coast, and join us here that also can speak a little bit more in depth from the buyer's perspective. So I'm going to bring on in Joe Parecka.
Hello, hi, yes.
How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm really excited to talk about this. And yes, a West Coaster, and work primarily with buyers. So happy to kind of give what I think could happen, not only out here but also to buyers. And like you touched on this, wow, just some interesting developments recently that are probably going to have some big ramifications. And there's been a lot of talk and news swirling around. So I think this is a phenomenal topic, and I think there's a lot to discuss and talk about.
Yeah, interesting is is a word. Know, I mean, I'm dissecting. I have 2 pages of notes of things because I'm like, this is just, it's bonkers. Like in terms, like there's so much misinformation by the public on, what they think this is all about, right? They think that, the sellers have been cornered, with forcing to be paid, the commissions of it's, all the real estate agents are in collusion and they're forcing, sellers to pay the 6%. And, we're the victims here and the whole 9 yards. And it's like, that is not what's actually happening.
No, not at all.
So I wanted to kind of divide this into a couple parts. Okay. And, kind of hit on like the general stuff first. And then kind of talk to you, we'll have a discussion about like how this is going to impact sellers, and how this is going to impact buyers who, in my opinion, are absolutely the losers in this case. And between the if you look at the parties involved, the buyers, the sellers, the real estate agents, the attorneys. So congratulations, attorneys.
Yes.
You just made 30% of $418 million.
Yeah.
Good on you.
And like I said, I wonder if their fee was negotiable. Anyways, we'll get into that.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But I wanted to pull up just to kick it off for those that are watching that may not know fully about what we're talking about. So I'm just going to pull up an article off Fortune magazine. I can get my screen to come up here, just to show, kind of outline just the key points on. And I'm not going to read this whole article, but of course, I'm sure nobody wants me to do that. But the biggest thing about this lawsuit, and of course, the basis of this lawsuit was that sellers were essentially accusing real estate agents of collusion, right? That they did not know that part of their fee was going towards a buyer's agent, and that it was a conflict of interest, that part of that fee was going to the seller's agent, part of the fee was going to the buyer's agent. The seller didn't know, and the seller said, why should we pay the buyer's agent and give them, part of that fee that we're paying? And so, on the heels of that, of that lawsuit, So it goes into like how the rules are going to be changing. See if I can find the part here that I'm looking for. I think this is part of the NAR. This is it. The NAR, National Association of Realtors, agreed to no longer require a broker advertising a home for sale on MLS to offer any upfront compensation to a buyer's agent, which essentially means that nobody knows that they're not required to let any of the agents know what the heck they're getting paid, if they're getting paid at all. It leaves the rule change. I can't read today. The rule change leaves it open for individual home sellers to negotiate such offers with a buyer's agent outside of the MLS platforms through the home seller's broker, and though the home seller's broker has to disclose any such compensation arrangements. And I'm just going to go through this, and then we're gonna pull this thing apart like crazy. It's requiring this is probably the only good thing out of this whole thing is the trade group also agreed to require agents or others working with home buyers to enter into a written agreement. Essentially, what they're saying is that you have a listing agreement with a seller. Now you have to have a buyer's agreement with a buyer. Great. Okay. And then they said finally the rule change, which is set to go into effect mid-July. All right. So the first things first, right? And Joe and I, you and I were talking, before we started. This needs to be approved by the court.
Yeah, this isn't just some automatic thing. A lot of people think, oh, NAR proposes and this is going to happen. No, exactly that. NAR proposed this as a solution. And part of it was because they wanted to kind of the sense that I got was that, NAR didn't really want to work that hard at coming up with a solution. So they just said, okay, how about this?
Yeah.
And it still does need to be approved. It needs to be accepted by the court and approved by the DOJ. So at some point, I don't want to say it could get reversed, but they could say, no, you're going to need to go back to the drawing board because this agreement is not what we find to be acceptable. So this is not written in stone. This is not what's going to happen for certain. This is just one proposed idea that likely probably will get accepted, but it's not for sure.
No, and I think there's just too many, there's just too many holes, too many things that they essentially, rolled back the clock. Okay, to 1990. So 1990.
We rolled back the clock to like 1910 before we even had cooperation. But yes, to 1990. Yes.
Well, correct. That's the thing is that by removing that disclosure, right? The whole reason that they wanted agents to for full disclosure. Not only that, but full disclosure on Zillow and all the public websites, so that the buyer knew to prevent steering. Right. Because they think that, because there are, let's be honest, it's the 80-20 rule. Like, 20% of the agents do 80% of the work. Well, that other 80%, that unprofessional 80%, the 80% that is probably going to be hurt by this because they don't have the professional standards that they should have.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
They're the ones that potentially are, going to say, okay, Mr. Buyer, this one's paying me 2%. This one's paying me 2.5%. You know what? I think the 2.5% one fits your needs better.
Mm-hmm.
Because now the buyer can see, well, what about that one? And they can advocate for themselves. Gone.
Yeah.
Transparency gone. So exactly roll back the clocks and cover everything up, make everything secret. But with the buyer agency, and you're on the West Coast. So buyer agency started, right? 1990. And right around 1990, started on West Coast. You guys did it first, right? What's that?
Back when I was a young buck, I was.
Oh, stop! I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it, buddy. I don't want to hear it. So it started on West Coast. I got in the business in '96. So in '96, it was making its way. Everything moves from west to east. It was making its way our way. So when I got in, people started, it was like, we still did sub agency where it was, working for the buyer, but not really working for the buyer. We're sub agents of the seller. And so it wasn't long. I think it was about a year or 2 years in, like right around 1998, that it really courses and education, and this is the way we're going to do. And I got certified and all the things, and on proper buyer representation. And they did it because the consumer advocate said buyers deserve representation.
Yep. Yeah.
Buyers deserve representation. And so now, now it's no, now you're on your own, because
you're on your own. Yeah,
you're on your own.
That's exactly what it is. And it's a little bit scary to think about. What's interesting is, and you touched on it a little bit earlier about the transparency with the commission, and also the fact that now buyers are on their own when it comes to representation. Obviously, buyers had the free will to choose whatever agent they felt would perform the best, that they work best with to represent them. But that hill had just got a lot steeper and a lot harder to climb for the buyers. But what's so funny is sort of the DOJ and all this stuff was framed in a way that this is going to help consumers,
right?
And this is going to help people. And so you have this interesting thing where the government says we're gonna step in and help, which that's a sticky situation. And now like you said, they've taken away transparency in what the buyer's agent's going to make, because it used to be on Zillow and Redfin and Trulia and Realtor.com and all that stuff. It was on there, so you could see. So you've taken away that transparency, like you mentioned, and you've also taken away potentially the ability for home buyers to have representation,
right,
and competent representation, and then also bearing the burden, or potentially bearing the burden of the cost of that representation.
Right.
So it's the idea that this is better for the consumer. I don't know if I can get behind that.
No. And so, I mean, if we dial it back, right, we start at the beginning of why this whole thing started. And,
yes,
we take a look at like the impact on like the sellers. The sellers are the ones that, accused real estate agents of this collusion. And there's so many different things I want to unpack here, because as I consider myself a veteran in the business. Okay. And to the media that's coming out, and the news stories and the things, for example, 6% commissions gone. Joe, I haven't seen 6% commissions in Massachusetts in 20 plus years.
Yeah. And
it has, 6% is a farce. Okay. So that's number one.
Right.
Okay. So number two, real estate agents have to start negotiating, like their days of just monopoly and non-negotiation is over. Never has it ever been non-negotiable.
And even Never. When they said they have these headlines that say, oh, the age of the 6% real estate commission's over, that right there, that headline makes it sound like there is a standard set commission, which would be price fixing, which would be a violation, which has never been the case. Now, I don't know, and this is one point that I really wanted to bring up, especially since real estate differs. As we all know, PSA for everyone out there, real estate's hyper local. So both in the market and what happens, hyper local. We're talking on very generalized terms here, but West Coast and East Coast vary greatly in the way that real estate is conducted. And there's closing attorneys on the East Coast. There's not closing attorneys on the West Coast, so on and so forth. I don't know about the East Coast sales contract, the purchase agreement, listing agreement. What I can tell you is here on the West Coast, on page 1 of the listing agreement, is paragraph 2. This is the first step after address of the property and seller's names. Then you put in the price.
Yep.
And then in big bold print, it says real estate commissions are negotiable.
Same.
And then there's a blank spot for real estate commissions. And then furthermore, for sellers to say, I didn't know I was paying for buyer representation. If you go down 3 paragraphs, it says there's a spot and a checkbox that is a mandatory field, at least in my MLS, in my area. There's a mandatory field that my broker says you have to have this filled out. And it says exactly how much is going to the buyer's agent.
Yeah, Massachusetts, it's the same thing. It's in one paragraph. It's in one paragraph in our state forms, where it'll say that this is the fee that's agreed on. this percentage is going to a seller's agent. This percentage is going to a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
It's right on the listing contract.
Yeah. First
And
page.
so at what point in time we're at fault? Now, let me take a step back. Okay. I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to play devil's advocate. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay. It's on paper. You say, well, the consumer should read it. Let's assume that, okay, we still have a responsibility to make sure that they understand, even if they don't read it.
Yeah.
Because people don't read things. They say, they're sitting down with their agent and they trust their agent and they're like, oh, just sign. I see it at the closings. Just sign away. They don't even read what's on the paper. And then after the fact.
Yeah.
Now, a good agent, and part of this is just being overly detailed about things.
Yep.
I go through and make sure, hey, do you understand this? But 80-20 rule. If the agent, if the agent's just like, if they say, well, what's that? Oh, don't worry about that. That's just the way we do it. That's just the way it works in real estate.
Yeah.
Well, then that's our fault.
Yeah.
That's our fault for as an
you.
industry, that's
Complete
our
agreement.
fault for not explaining. But this whole 6% thing and this whole collusion thing, it's the models, again, you're right. East Coast, West Coast, and across the country, it's going to be different. But I know we're here now. And these models do exist where you have MLS only. You have discount brokerages.
Oh, 1% listing
fee for service.
Flat fee. Yeah.
Flat fee services. So, here's the thing. You walk into Nordstrom and you're like, I don't want to pay $300 for shoes. Is Nordstrom going to be like, oh, okay, well, what would you like to pay?
Yeah.
No, they're going to be like, no, then go to Walmart.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Go to Walmart.
And that's the same thing. And people go, well, this is gonna be great because it's so much better for the consumer. Sellers have had the choice forever to represent themselves for 0%. They've had the choice to go with 1% listing fee options, which is quite literally, we're just going to put your home in the MLS and good luck to you. They've had the chance to go for the discount listing brokers, which is like, okay, maybe I'll charge 2 or 3%. And I'll give 1% out to the buyer's agent just because.
Yep.
And then they have the chance to go with a more traditional model, which is, could be any gamut of the percentages we talked about.
And you know what, Joe? All of those models have a home. Like I'm not saying that they're any like the traditional model is the best model, the only model. I think it really does depend on the homeowner. You have a homeowner, a seller that maybe has sold a ton of properties. Maybe they were in real estate. Maybe endless possibilities.
Yep.
There's not a one size fits all, and that's why those models exist. And I think that there's something different for everyone. But to have a seller say, I want the full boat model, but I don't want to pay full boat prices. And why won't you do it? And now because you won't offer it to me, you're colluding. Well, no, that's just, I've had plenty of situations where, a seller will say, let's negotiate and I want to do it for this. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that because the level of service that I provide, the amount of time I spend, I financially can't do it. And they say, well, then, and if that's the only thing and this is a personal level for me.
Yeah.
Okay. If that's the only thing they're interested in, then they're not a good fit for me because I'm not looking for that type of a client. Okay?
I agree with you. I want
to work with someone that sees the value that I bring. And that's okay because there's plenty of other fish in the sea. There's plenty of other real estate agents, but the models exist. I wanted to just touch on just because it's like, I feel like this is a clearing of the air or something of that nature. Saying like maybe these things, when things like this happen, this is why I say this is not all bad, right? Because I think there's going to be a lot of things that bubble up in our industry where we don't talk about them. And one of the things that doesn't get talked about is like how we get paid. And so you see that 6%, you say 5%, and it's a lot of money.
Yeah, everybody can. I tell everybody, hey, you can do basic math. We all have calculators on our phones. We can all find out what 5% of X sales price is, And we can all look at that and go, whoa, okay. But yes, let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because it's easy to sit and judge and say, that, oh my gosh, okay, it's a $500,000 house, or 100, it's $500,000 house, right? And you're
Yep.
doing 5% of
Yep.
that $500,000 house, right? So $25,000. It's a crap. It's like, well, you're like rich. They're like, it's like, well, you must be, raking in the dough.
My favorite is when I tell my friends and they go, "Oh, Joe, you only have to sell like 4 houses a year to make a good living." And I'm like, if only.
The average number of homes that a real estate agent sells in the country?
I know the answer, but enlighten everyone that's watching.
Yeah, like it's between 5 and 6. It's between 4 and 6 a year.
Less than 50% sell one.
Yep, it's crazy. I pulled these demographics up just for talking points, because I think it's very interesting. I was super surprised actually at some of these talking points. This shocked me, that the typical, this is a realtor.com demographics. The typical realtor is a 60-year-old white female with 60. So
yeah, isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. Okay, but what's more interesting to me is that right here, the median gross income of realtors, income earned from all real estate activities, and this was 2022. Okay, so a couple years ago, but still relevant. $56,000. 56. That's not $2 million. That's not 500,000. That's not 500
in America with $56,000 a year.
That'd be tough to pay a mortgage.
Yeah.
Like
well, as you know now, you have the average to afford the average priced home in America, you have to make roughly $107,000 a year. Now, whether that's individual or household, whatever it is, but that's just about half of what you would need to afford the average price home in America. So this idea that, if you're a real estate agent, you obviously drive a Mercedes, you obviously own 4 income properties, you obviously have the house whatever house you want to have. Obviously that is the case for some agents, but that is not the mass average. I drive a Kia and live in a very average home in my.
I'm very it's all the time. I'll have clients that if they call me and I meet up with them 3, 4, 5, 6 years after, we work together, and I pull up and I'm driving the same car that when I was working with them. It's because, I'm not, now it's a comfortable car, but it's not like I'm not getting a new car every 2 years or fancy, whatever. I think but the point that I was trying to make on this is that, no, I'm not trying to make the point that, we're all poor. No, we're not poor, but the reality of it is okay, say if it were 6%, just for argument's sake, right? Yeah. Just say it were 6%. Well, at that 6%, the way it always has been done, the collusion way.
Yeah, the collusion way.
Anyways, it's 3 and 3. So now I have 3%. Well, that 3%, I don't keep 3%. Okay, so now you're having $12,500 of that commission. Out of that $12,500, now a piece of it goes to whatever brokerage I work for, because I don't work for myself. I can't, unless I'm a broker. I can't. I have to work under a brokerage. So a piece of that goes to my brokerage. Now, the brokerage I work for, because I pay a lot of my own expenses, the fee is lower, but the average is anywhere between 10, 15% of what your income goes to the broker. Okay. Yeah. So now you're talking, maybe you're talking another, $2,000. Now you're down to $10,000, and now you got to pay Uncle Sam.
Well, and before you even pay Uncle Sam, what if you're part of a team? What if you have a team, right? And that was my model for a long time. And well, again, and this is just my experience. But before I even paid the broker, I had to pay the franchise. I was with a major franchise, and I had to pay a franchise fee. So before my broker even got paid, I had to pay the name on the sign, and that was a certain percentage. And then my broker says, okay, well, now I'm going to take my cut for having you operate under me, like you explained. Yep. And that was a certain percentage.
Right.
And then I had to pay a percentage to my team leader.
And if it was a referral.
Yes. And if it's a referral, that percentage is even bigger.
He goes down. If somebody came to me by way of referral, it's another 25%. If it's a relocation, it's 35%, right?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
now you're talking, and this is why this is going to hurt. It's going to hurt the consumer, but what's going to happen is a lot of agents are going to get out of the business, which may not be a bad thing, but
No.
but on the same note, a lot of good agents will say, you know what, I can't run a business under this model, because
Yes.
now you're talking, taxes. Okay, fine. Business expenses.
The next one.
Business has changed. When I got in the business, it was paper ads, it was newspapers and magazines and things, and those were expensive. But now it's virtual tours. It's
Yep.
3D tours, the hosting on these companies, the software that I use.
If
Okay.
I had a dollar for every monthly subscription that I had that was business related,
Mhm.
I could pay for like 2 or 3 of the subscriptions. I mean, and listen, that's not unique. I know that there's a lot of people out there that well, I've got my monthly subscriptions for this and that and the other thing, and that's fine. But again, it's a cost of doing business that a
It's like,
lot of
yeah,
consumers don't realize, and it's difficult. I think most agents will tell you the hardest part about our business is getting and maintaining business, and that is very expensive. And that, I think, goes with a lot of businesses,
yep.
which is why there's so much money spent on advertising and getting your name out there and being in the
And just
community and
maintaining relationships. I mean,
yep.
and you know what? And I don't mind being transparent on this. My budget, the way it is set now, and to be honest, I run a pretty conservative budget, but just to give like the general public some sort of reference point.
Yeah.
Okay. I need to bring in, okay, roughly, and this is actually not even counting, that I'm not going to even, like, not even the brokerage fees. I'm going to keep that out of it. But easily, $20,000 to $25,000 a year
Mm-hmm.
just to break even.
Right.
Like, and
Yeah.
those are expenses that I have to cover before I can actually bring money into
Right.
my
Right.
personal household. So, it's the type of thing that, that the DOJ is making this sound like we're rolling in the cash, and
And not even to mention, and then obviously we can move on from this, but
yeah.
not even to mention that let's talk about those times where as an agent, you don't get paid for 3 months.
Right.
Right. Well, I
Right.
mean, so
Right.
it's like that. That's a very real thing. And I mean, we looked at the stat. A large majority of agents sell one home a year. Okay, so maybe they're not full time. Maybe they have a different job. But of the agents that are full time, one of the biggest stressors is, am I going to get a paycheck not this week, not this pay period, but am I going to get a paycheck this month?
Right.
And that's just part of what we do in the business. That's just part of it. And so this idea that so like to your example, 25K, half of it goes to a buyer's agent. So there's now this buyer's agent or the seller's agent has made $12,500, which is a lot of money still in
Right.
this day and age. And you think, wow, man, if that's really good. Okay, then expenses all that. Even if you didn't take expenses, if that's the one paycheck you've had in 2.5 or 3 months, how juicy is that 12.5 now?
So
I
here,
mean,
so here's a question for you. So if you have an agent, right, and this is all about like the impact on the consumer and elevating the consumer experience.
yep.
So you have an agent who says, okay, I want to help. I want to be in real estate. I want to help people, counsel people in the whole 9 yards. But I cannot afford to do that because I'm either working with buyers that can't pay me, so I can't work
Right.
with them. Okay. I don't have enough seller business. So I have to take up another job
Yep.
to supplement my income. Now you have an agent that is not staying current with industry news, that's not involved on a day-to-day basis, not available when
Mhm.
they do have a client.
Yeah.
It's a reduced level of professionalism
Yes.
that does
Yep.
it, and that is a huge negative impact, or negative, it's a huge negative impact on how the value is presented, how we take care of these
You're
consumers. So
exactly right.
let's move on to talking about that, because I really want to dig into like how this is going to how it impacts sellers, because like the sellers were and we talked a little bit about it already in terms of, the fee structures and stuff like that. But, the impact on the sellers and how this lawsuit, how this settlement is in real time. And again, still has to be approved by the court. It's not going to roll out tomorrow. And my clients watching this, and you can listen to your house next week. Nothing's going to change.
Nothing changes.
So, but the reality of it is it very well will likely change come July. We don't know how yet, in terms of specifics, but there are going to be some things. And the first thing is that the sellers will still have an option. And I'll be honest, in Massachusetts, my recommendation to my sellers is going to be, if you want the most exposure for your home, offer buyer agent compensation.
Absolutely. And that would be my same advice to my seller clients. Again, I do heavily work with a lot of buyers, but as we all know in our industry, and I've been doing this for 10 years, buyers turn into sellers. So you start working with a lot of buyers, then over time they go, "Hey Joe, the house you sold me, I need to sell it now because I got to go for work or whatever."
Yep.
And I would advise the same thing, because, and this is how I explained it to my broker today. We were talking about this, and I said, when you sit down at a listing appointment with a seller and they go, "Hey, I'm a very savvy seller and I'm up to date, and I've heard the news that agent commissions are the way that we know it, they're dead. I don't have to pay anybody 6%, which, by the way, they didn't have to before.
Right. Right.
But I digress. And they go, "So I am only going to pay you, instead of 6%, and because I took the buyers, I'm only going to pay one agent. Now I'm going to pay you 3%. And that's the only commission that I'm going to pay." Okay. So now as a listing agent, I'm going to say, okay, that's fine if you'd like to do that. But just realize that if you're not going to offer buyer's agent compensation, that means that you're, number one, going to limit, as you were talking about, you're going to limit the amount of buyers that can even purchase your home now, because they can no longer afford representation on top of the already insurmountable down payment that they have to obtain. And then secondly, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, those buyers are going to go out, find their own representation that they can afford, which is, as we've already identified, probably a lower, it's obviously a lower rate, could be a lower caliber agent. Doesn't necessarily mean they are, but typically the old saying is true. You do get what you pay for. And so now the buyers are going to submit this offer with this agent, Mr. and Mr. Seller, could be a potential to have a lower skill level. And now we're going to work to sell your biggest asset as a team: buyer, seller, listing agent, and buyer's agent. And we quite possibly could have a team that is now weak, and we're going to handle in my area, the average sale price in my little town in the suburbs of Los Angeles is right around $1 million. So we're going to handle your $1 million property and the biggest asset you probably ever owned. We're going to handle this with someone who may or may not be competent,
right,
in representing the buyer.
I would go a step further, though. I would go a step further and say, more so than that, if the seller says, "Okay, I'll pay you 3%. I agree to your fee that you said that's the way it is, because that's the way I presented it. This is just the way I do business. Like, this is how much it is. It's not how much do you want to pay me." You don't walk into your attorney and say, and the attorney's like, "Well, how much do you want to pay me? I'll give, can you take $50? Okay." No, that's not the way it works. The attorney tells you what the fee is, right?
Just with every other commodity that's ever been purchased.
Exactly. So if the seller says, "But I'm not willing to pay 3% to the buyer's agent, I'm only willing to pay 1%, then Mr. Seller, that 2% needs to come from somewhere.
Exactly.
And the buyer's agent is going to have to get that from the buyer. And if the buyer doesn't have 2%, you have lost that buyer.
Yep.
And I understand, Mr. Seller, that yes, that's money that you have to pay. However, it's the laws of attraction in terms of the number. You have more buyers, more offers, your chances of getting a higher sales price increases incrementally.
Yep.
If you have 5 people and 2 offers versus 10 people and 4 offers, those 4 people, those 4 offers, it is absolutely a high, especially the last 4 years, a
Yep.
much higher probability of pushing up that price, because
And
what
we've seen it.
happens is right, those buyers, even though we don't discuss and say, we don't, each buyer doesn't know what the other buyer is offering.
Hmm.
Okay. But they know that there's another buyer. So I go to the buyer's agent and I say, hey, listen, we have 3 other offers,
Yep.
right? They don't know, but the buyer starts to get like, you know what? I really, really, really love this house. I
Yep.
don't want to lose it. But if
Yeah.
there's only 2 offers, they're like, you know what? We're going to gamble and we'll
Yep.
see. It's just the way it works, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there's that. But the other point that, really, really concerns me as far as the, potential pitfall of this whole new layout with the sellers is the potential for discrimination,
Yeah.
right? And what
Yep.
I mean by that is you have a seller that wants, let's say you have a seller's agent, and the seller's agent says, you know what, Mr. Seller, if you
Yep.
attract, maybe you're in an affluent neighborhood, and you're like, you know what, we know we want to attract affluent buyers. We want buyers that are like you, Mr. Seller. Maybe
Hmm.
the same, all the different, protected classes, right?
Yep.
And you say, you know what, don't offer buyer's agent commission, and you'll attract the same type of buyers. So now you have all of these buyers over here that are very well, could be well paying, well qualified, but maybe they just don't have the cash to pay
Yeah.
the buyer's agent.
Yep.
Now that seller has completely that has pushed them out of the picture, and is only going to allow these affluent buyers that are cash rich,
Great point.
they're flush
That's a
with cash, and
yeah,
they're like, you know what, we can pay our buyer's agent, no problem.
it's a great point.
What
Yep.
the heck? Like
Yeah.
that's a lawsuit in the making, right? Like
Correct.
that for me completely again turns back the clock for transparency and fairness to all. I mean, the reality of it is we were talking a little bit about this, and I wanted to actually kick it off, talk about this at the beginning. One of the things that's talked about a lot in the articles now, right, in the media, is
Hmm.
that this will reduce sale prices. The whole crux of this is that, the sellers are not paying as much for fees, so it's going to reduce the prices and it's going to be more affordable for the buyers, which is going to help solve this affordability problem in this country. Okay, so I hear that and I cringe, because
Yep.
if I'm a
I do too.
homeowner,
Yeah.
right, and on my house is on the open market worth $500,000. Okay. And I am looking at this fee, and maybe I can save myself $15,000 off commission. Do you
Yep.
think I'm going to let a buyer who makes an offer at 485 take the house?
No.
No. I'm
No.
going to put it on the market for fair market value. I'm
Right.
not reducing my sale price.
Right. Right.
So
No. That's exactly
it,
it.
it only allows the seller to keep more money. And can I just make a side note that I mean, I'm super happy for all those sellers that cashed out in the last 4 years.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. You guys made a boatload of money. You made a boatload of money. But like, you guys, the sellers, they're the ones that brought this lawsuit. Like, they're the ones that are crying,
Yeah.
poor mouth. The ones that made a ton of money
Yeah.
on this super high inflated market.
Yeah.
So,
With buyers paying 50 and 100K over, these sometimes first time home buyers that are stretching, that are trying to basically do whatever they can do to get out of whatever apartment they live in during COVID and get on
yep,
the train of building equity and all this stuff. And yeah, and then under the guise of, well, we didn't know.
we didn't
And
know. We
and
didn't know. And
we
then
didn't
so
know.
it's just it's sad to me. And like I said, I like at the beginning, I truly believe that these sellers, whoever the sellers that got together, it was, I think it was herded by attorneys.
Of
Attorneys
course.
saw a cash grab opportunity, and they're like, hey,
Yeah.
get some of your friends. You've been wronged. You've been wronged. You
Yeah.
can cash out. You know what I
Don't you
mean?
feel how didn't you see how you were tricked? You were
You were
tricked.
you
See
were
how you were
tricked.
tricked? And they're like, wait a minute, I was tricked. You're like,
Yes,
but
well, and
no,
so
you
and then
weren't.
you have these poor buyers like you were saying, paid overprice, waiving inspections, doing all the things that put them at risk.
Yeah, all
Getting
these
their
things.
and now this is like kicking them when they're down.
Yeah.
They're saying,
Yeah.
okay, oh, by the way, yes, I know it's still a multiple offer situation. The prices on certain markets in the country, the prices are coming down, but overall,
But not,
it's
I mean,
either
we're talking about, it pales in comparison over to the gains of what we see, which
yes.
is, that's a whole other topic for a whole other live stream where we can talk about crash bros hyperinflating the loss of property value.
Oh, it's
Because
not real.
yeah,
It is
because
absolutely not real.
properties went up, 20 and 30 and 40%. They backslide 5 to 10%. They're like, oh, market crash. And you're like, well, that's a net gain. Anyways, I digress. It just doesn't make any sense. And now, like you said, these buyers have these huge obstacles. I mean, heck, they even, waiting in line hours just to see a house
Right.
because there's so much competition. And now they're somehow supposed to be able to generate an appropriate amount of commission for their representation. I mean, attorneys aren't cheap. Good doctors aren't cheap.
Yep.
Good representation when you're talking about purchasing the biggest asset you will likely ever purchase is probably not an area where you want to go. But can I find someone cheaper? I mean,
would you go to Walmart to get your heart surgeon?
Right.
Because
exactly.
it's cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. It's that same sense. And it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. And by the way, the sellers, they claim that I'm the one paying out of my proceeds, which technically is true. But where do those proceeds come from, Jen? Where do those proceeds come from?
Right.
They come from the buyer. And they come from the mortgage lender or the buyer who's buying cash. And guess what? There are no seller proceeds if there's no buyer that's willing to purchase the property.
It's a dicey area because the reality of it is that technically the seller's not paying the buyer's agent.
Correct. Yeah, there's no.
Technically, there is the seller's paying XYZ Realty.
Yes.
Period. We are disclosing because we're trying to be transparent that, hey, by the way,
we're trying to do the right thing.
Your piece of that is going to compensate because we know that it's in your best interest to open this up to every possible buyer. And if they're represented, we're going to compensate the buyer's agent because we want to get these people in your house. But that if for years, if a buyer went directly to a listing agent and there was no buyer's agent, the fee is the same.
Yes, and that's the thing I've never understood. These people go, "Oh, I'm gonna go directly to the listing agent so I can get a deal." Jen, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, especially during the COVID stuff and all this stuff. And it's just like, what deal do you think that you're getting? Do you think that you're somehow going to save? I mean, is it possible that listing agent is willing to have some concessions to their commission if they get the full commission? Yes, that's possible. But this idea that you're going to buy a house for like $60K or $50K under the BO, because no, that just doesn't make any sense.
Especially now. I mean, I know that a couple times, I've had people come to me and ask me, can I get a better, I'm hoping I can get a better deal because, the agents, they just want to get the property sold. And if, and they'll be saving money. It's like, well, wait a minute. Okay. So number one, it's been a seller's market for years.
Yeah.
Then there's been more of an influx of buyers over the last 4 years, but it hasn't been, if you price a property properly, it hasn't been a problem getting a property sold. Correct. So like, you're not doing me a favor by coming to me. Then number two, I do the same amount of work. Like if I was representing you as a buyer and had all the paperwork and attend inspections, everything else. Yes. When it's a dual, I don't practice dual agency. I have backed away from, I don't believe in dual agency. I think that, dual agency is, for those watching, it's essentially you have your foot in both ponds, buyer representation, seller representation.
It's possible, but it's difficult.
It's very, very, very difficult. And theoretically what happens is you draw a line in the sand and you say, everything that the buyer tells me, I'm not going to tell the seller, and everything that the seller tells me, I'm not going to tell the buyer. That is 100% almost impossible to manage. And as from a high moral standard, whatever. Like I just ethically, I just can't do it and won't do it. So if a buyer comes to me directly, I will just tell them, listen, I can present your contract.
Yep.
You should get an attorney, but I will present but I cannot represent you. So I had another thought on this, how it impacts the sellers. So seller wants to sell. He wants to buy another house, sell and buy.
Which is very common because most people don't want to go homeless.
Right. Unless they're moving back in with their parents, God forbid. But anyways, so they sell their house. Yep. 3%. Yay, I saved money. Now you're going to buy.
Yeah, and you got to pay 3% or whatever.
So what are they saving? What are they saving? Like it's not it's not what it's far more complicated and far more what's the word I'm looking for when it's fuzzy, Joe, when it's like convoluted than what the media is making it out to be, like very simple.
They make it out to seem like boom, decision, money saved, cheaper houses,
everybody wins.
Go consumers. Screw real estate agents. Like,
so let's talk about the real victims in this, because I think that yes, the agents are going to, it's going to be tough on some agents. I'll be honest, I'm not concerned. I think that from an agent's perspective, I feel like this could be and will be a good thing, because I think a lot of the crummy agents, the lazy agents, the agents that are, they're really not doing their job. They're not going to be able to do their job anymore because they're not going to be able to just show up and take a lead off a whatever website and be like, oh, you're a buyer, I can show you a house. And then they go and do the thing. And then I'm tired as a listing agent. I list and sell, right? Yeah. It'll work with buyers and sellers. But when I'm a listing agent and representing a seller and have a buyer's agent that literally I talk to them when they present the offer, they don't know anything about the buyer. Ugh. And then I never hear from them again until the closing. And I end up doing half the work because they're not either not showing up or they don't know. I had an agent that didn't even know what was on the buyer's pre-approval. I said, what's this line item about a course that the buyers need to take? And she didn't even know about it. I think those, shaking up the industry and getting rid of that stuff is fantastic.
I agree with you, because I've always said there needs to be a higher barrier of entry to become a real estate agent.
Absolutely. And it's sad. It's very, very sad.
Because there's a lot that you need to know. And again, I've said this multiple times before on the stream today, that we're talking about working with people's biggest asset, their nest egg. I mean, in 95% of the times here, we're talking about this is a big deal for these people, a huge deal, the biggest deal for these people other than a serious health problem. And you need to know what you're doing. And there's a lot of agents, as you've kind of sort of alluded to here, that they just, take a couple courses, pay some licensing fees, pay some MLS fees, and they have all the same powers and privileges and responsibilities and duties that agents like you and I have that have been honing skills for a really long time. And that's where, again, I go back to sort of the thing where you're going to be able to find cut rate buyers agents. This is exactly what I mean. You're going to be able to go out and find an agent that goes, yeah, I got a license, and yeah, I'll work for $1,500. Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then
I'm they'll get paid what they're worth, though. They'll get paid what they're worth because they don't know how to educate their buyer, and they don't know how to demonstrate their value. So I don't consider agents, the agents are not the victims here. I really don't think the agents are not the victims. The real victims are the buyers.
The
buyers are getting the only positive thing that came out of this for the buyers is the mandatory buyer agency agreement.
And that's also good for the agents too.
It's good for the agents too. And it's something that
good.
Massachusetts, we have it. I've been doing it for forever. And it's just like you just put it in.
I'll tell you what, here in California, it varies. It's a very regional thing. Even here in California, in my market, it is less common to see exclusive buyer representation agreements. I've only had to use one time. because I've always felt like I'm going to demonstrate my value to you and my knowledge. And then you're going to go, this guy, he gets it. I want him to represent me, and bingo, there you go. But I do believe that it's better for the agent and the buyers.
And it's not going to come as a surprise to the consumer, because I have had people that are coming in that contact me off my YouTube channel or whatnot from other states, right? That are moving to my area. And it is common for me to get an email before we meet. And I usually do it between the interview period, where I get on a Zoom call or something, and it's a two-way interview because I want to decide if I want to commit my time to this person, right?
Yep, absolutely.
It's between that and the time I actually meet with them in person. And during that time, it's not uncommon for them to email me and say, do you have something for me to sign? Is there an agreement that you want me to sign and review?
Yep.
Like they ask me, like it's the expectation's already there.
Yeah.
With consumers.
And it just clarifies everything. It clarifies everything. It spells it out. It gives a good framework to what the relationship will be, what the buyer's agent's duties are. Yep. And then also as an agent, and I don't know if you've had this happen, if you've been using exclusive buyer agreements for some time. I've had this happen where I invest time with people, a lot of time with people. I show them houses. I do things. We've written offers even. Maybe we've written several offers. There's one buyer that comes to mind where during the unicorn years of COVID, we wrote 8 or 9 offers. Couldn't get one accepted because it was insane. They go, okay, we're going to rent. Find them a rental, put them into a rental. And then we stay in touch. We know each other. He owns a business in town that I would go to. I'd see him there. Lo and behold, buys a house with a different agent because he walks into an open house and this agent says, I can make this happen for you. And he's got all his right in the world to choose his representation. But as an agent, then it's like, hey, I know that we're committed to each other. And I know that I'm going to do a good job for you. You're going to do a good job for me in terms of being a good consumer. So I wholeheartedly believe that is a positive and a benefit for both parties. And then also now if we're talking about having to include buyers paying compensation to their agent, that needs to be and firmed up somewhere. That can't just be floating out in space.
So I wanted to that was the one good thing.
Yes.
Now let's talk about how, for lack of a better word, the buyers are getting screwed. Okay. Yeah. So the first thing obviously is that, with this compensation model, the way that they want us to do it, if a buyer's agent, or what a buyer can do is, put it in their offer, right? Okay, fine. We can put in their offer. The buyer is requesting the seller pay, whatever fee that it's on the buyer agent agreement. Will the seller pay that fee as part of their offer? Okay, great. Seller says no. Or maybe there's a multiple offer situation where the other offers are coming in without, and not even cash offers.
No,
not even cash offers. Maybe they're going to pay their agent. No big deal. They're financing, but maybe they're big enough down payment or whatnot that they can take care of it on their own.
Yeah.
Those buyers are two choices. They're going to lose the house.
Yep.
Or they go without their agent.
Yep.
And buying, I think this is where, as an industry, we have fallen short, because the amount of protection that an agent provides as that go-between between the buyer and the listing agent. The listing agent, the listing agent is not under any obligation to tell the buyer anything. The listing agent, however, will tell the seller everything. Yep. And so the buyer comes in, especially a first-time home buyer, and they're naive. And they're like, oh, we really, here's our offer. And I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen with buyers, and they're like, you know what, this is my offer, but you know what, we really love the house, and we don't. So I mean, we can go up. We can go up 20 or 30,000, but we
negotiate against yourself.
And they just don't understand that they don't understand negotiation principles and the negotiation tactics.
And they shouldn't, because this is not what they do.
This is not what they do.
They're teachers, they're mechanics, they're doctors. They're not they shouldn't have to do this. And the idea that you go, yeah, okay, you can go on Google, you can go on Reddit, you can go on YouTube to learn from fine people like you and I. You can get some knowledge and you can scratch the surface of it.
Doesn't give you every
to become an expert, to be able to handle this on your own, just because.
Not only that, but I have sometimes general questions, right? People will ask, clients will ask, well, how do you handle, multiple offer situations? I get that question on both sides of the fence, right?
Yeah.
And usually what I'll say is I'll give a very broad general response.
Yep.
And then I'll say, it depends.
It does.
It depends on the seller situation. It depends on the buyer situation. It depends on the parties involved. Like there's so many different pieces of the puzzle that affect how you negotiate this offer. You know, it's not a one size, like, here are my instructions on how to negotiate.
Step 1 is this. Step 2 is this.
No, it's not the way it works. You have to read the room.
Yeah.
You have to read the room.
That's a great way to put it, because I even tell my clients, it depends on, okay, have I worked with this agent before and do I know their style? And sometimes I'll tell clients, they'll say, hey, do you think they're going to come back with a counter offer? Do you think they're just going to accept an offer? Is it going to be a multiple counter offer situation? Right. Is there multiple offers? And I'll tell them, I can, I've gone through, and just on the way that they have filled out the MLS input, I can tell that this is the type of agent that's going to want this type of response or whatever,
like you said, or not, or it's a sloppy agent.
Yeah.
Put your guard up.
Yes.
Right. And put your guard up. Like,
I told clients that.
Let's prepare ourselves for what could possibly happen. Like, and that's the thing is like, you just, a average consumer isn't going to know. And now you have the DOJ telling this buyer, sorry, Charlie, if you can't afford, you're not getting buyer representation. You're out of luck. You're on your own, pal.
And furthermore, it's almost like the discriminatory thing that you touched upon, where we all know that minority homeowners have an uphill battle in this country.
Yep.
That's no surprise there. And now we're going to tell them that their battle just got steeper and harder and longer, because now the quality of their representation could be based upon what they can afford. So now it's like you kind of touched on, it's like, well, if you've got more money, you'll get better representation. And if you've got less money, sorry about Charlie. It. And we know what that's code for. We've been doing this long enough that we know what that is code for. And that's not acceptable in my opinion, which is why, and we talked about this earlier, it leveled the playing field. And that's why we even decided to have cooperating compensation agreements back in, what was it, 1908 or something, is when it originally was like, hey, 1912 is when we were like, hey, listen, this is how we're going to do it, because buyers are getting absolutely dragged through the mud by these self-serving agents and these sellers, because they have no protection. They have no recourse. They have no one in their corner fighting for them. And unfortunately, what has happened with this, sort of projected settlement or projected ruling, is that we're kind of working back towards that.
No, 100%. And it's, I feel like, by having these conversations, right? And these conversations are happening all over, right? Like, they're happening on YouTube, they're happening on webinars, they're going to happen in terms, and the level of educating on the consumer is going to rise, which is a great thing, because the public needs to know, the consumer needs to know that this is not, real estate agents saying, oh, well, we think we're self-serving and we want to make sure you have representation because it benefits us. That is not what's going on here. That is not what's going on here. What's happening, what we're trying to wave the red flag on is that, these buyers truly are going to pay more money on properties. They are going to pay more if they don't have good representation. It's like a seller who puts their house on the market. Now, if a seller does a for sale by owner, now this is, studies have shown for sale by owners sell for less than when they're listed with real estate agents. It is the way it is. And the reason is because the sellers typically don't have access. Number one, they used to not have all the access to the data But
Correct.
more importantly than having access to the data is the interpretation of the data.
Yes.
In order to have the knowledge to be able to interpret that data properly, you
Yeah.
have to have experience
It's that
in
honed
that
skill, that honed
industry.
skill that I
And
was
so
talking about.
they're gonna go on Zillow, or they're gonna do their own assessment of what
Yeah.
they think the house is worth. They're gonna put it on, and they're not gonna realize that, oh, if I price it here instead of here, I might net more buyers, met more multiple offers, and end up actually up here. They're
Yeah.
not gonna know that. So
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
a global scale, they end up on the big picture, they end up losing money. This is what's gonna happen with buyers because they don't have guidance. If they
Yep.
don't have that money for that representation,
And
they're gonna end up spending so much more money, which completely defeats the purpose of home
yes,
affordability, which
right.
is like the thing that everybody like. This is
That's the biggest problem facing the nation
it's 100
in terms of real estate.
all
Yeah.
time low.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's awful, and they've just so okay. All right,
Gotta
a little passionate.
recollect.
No passionate about this. Okay. Um, those that know me, like they're like, oh, Jen's just being Jen. But anyways, uh, let's talk about VA, FHA, rural development buyers.
Of all the buyers, we've already kind of discussed and set the groundwork that buyers are the ones that are getting hosed here. And of all of the buyers, especially your VA and your rural USDA people, I'm at a loss for words at the impact that this will have on them, because you think, oh, well, just write in the offer and make it part of the mortgage and all this. They can't do that. That is against the rules.
Well, and
They
even if
cannot write an
they,
offer that does that.
yeah, and even if they, like say the mortgage companies by July revise the rules, and they say, okay, VA buyers can roll it into the mortgage. Okay, USDA, rural development, FHA can. Here's the problem. Here's the problem with that. So now you have a, $10,000 commission. So
Yep, exactly.
you have a $10,000 commission. All right. You have a buyer who's barely squeaking by on what because home affordability is so low.
Yep.
You have a buyer that says, I'm pushing the envelope as high as I possibly can afford, get it qualified for a house, because because I don't have a big down payment.
Right.
Okay. This is why I'm doing these government loans, is to try to get my leg up. VA buyers, no PMI. Like there's a reason why those programs exist.
0% down, no PMI, 3% down FHA.
Exactly.
There's a reason we have made them.
Right now you're saying, oh, but Mr. Buyer, $10,000 of that down payment money or that closing cost, okay, that is going to be added to your loan amount, which then reduces the amount they get qualified for. Because
Absolutely.
the ceiling on their payment, right?
Yes.
Pre-approvals are based on what they can afford. Say they can afford $1,800 a month or $1,500 a month, right? So they can afford that $1,500 a month, whether they pay buyer's agent fees and it gets rolled in or not. That ceiling doesn't change. So now you add in that buyer agent fee, and now the amount of house they can buy has just been reduced.
Exactly.
In an already challenging market.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you think, and this goes for even conventional buyers, you think, okay, well, so this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. We're going to now, it's going to be on the burden of the buyer to pay for their buyer representation compensation. And we understand that people coming out of pocket $10, $15, or $20,000. Remember, some of these areas, your LAs, your San Diegos, your metropolitan areas where the average sale price is $1 million, $1.2 million, we're talking about substantial money. We're talking about a lot of money that buyers are going to have to come out of their pocket to pay their agent. And
there might be changes with that.
And there could be, and there very well could be.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about they have to pay this money, come out of pocket, and lenders go, we know that this isn't realistic. We know that there's already a huge burden on affordability. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow conventional buyers, FHA buyers, VA buyers, whoever, to take that, let's call it $15,000, and we're going to allow them to pay their real estate agent that $15,000. But we, as the mortgage company, are going to pay it, and we're going to wrap it up in your loan. We're going to make it a part of your loan, this specific thing that says buyers. Then you think, okay, well, that's kind of cool. Well, now what you've done is you've taken that $15,000 payment and you're amortizing it over 30 years. And it ends up costing God knows how much, especially based on the interest rate. How does that make anything more affordable, more palatable, or more stomachable? It doesn't. It makes it more expensive. And again, it doesn't matter. You think, oh, I'm a seller, I don't have to worry about that. Well, what happens when you sell and you need to live somewhere else? As you pointed out, Jen, now you're in that same predicament. You're in that same position of now I'm a buyer.
Yeah, the only difference would be is, you know, a seller coming in as a buyer has, you know, most of the time, I would think, you know, a highly probable they're going to be coming in with money. They're going to be, you know, in a market that we've had, they're going to have the funds. That was one of the reasons why it's been structured this way, is because they have the access to the funds, you know, on how, you know, how they're going to finance it, right? How they're going to do it. So, I mean, I think, you know, I don't know the answer. You know, we're pointing out all the flaws. I always tell my kids when they were growing up, I always would tell them, don't come to me with a complaint unless you have a proposed solution. Like, you know, come in and be like, I don't like this. And then just like stand there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
No, I said, if you're going to come to me with a complaint, I need to have, it's easy. Anybody can complain.
Sure.
We have a country of complainers.
Yes, we
do. Okay. We really do. Right. Yeah. The thing is like, you know, what needs to happen is we need to have proposed solutions. I don't know how we fix this. I mean, I don't know how this gets fixed, Joe. I don't know how you know what I think is going to happen? I think is going to happen is there's going to be a counter lawsuit from the advocate groups for the buyers. There's going to be a buyer consumer advocate group that is going to file lawsuits, okay, but against the National Association of Realtors or whoever knows, for on the behalf of them, saying this is not right that these buyers are being unfairly excluded. This is why we had buyer agency in the beginning.
Correct. No,
that's not an invalid, it wasn't done by mistake. That advocacy and the reason why the birth of buyer agency happened was because people felt like they weren't heard, they weren't represented, it wasn't fair.
Yeah.
And now, so it's just a matter of time before that happens. And I would not be surprised, that a friend of ours, a fellow YouTuber, mentioned this, and I agree with her 100%. I would not be shocked if this gets court approved. I think it likely will.
I do too.
Gets approved.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised if we're sitting here in a couple years, 3-4 years, and we go right back to the way it was. It's going to get rolled right back.
And that
like, the industry needs a shakeup. We absolutely need change. Something needs to happen, but this is just not the way to get it done. This is not the right avenue to get to the shakeup.
And it's not. And, we already know that there's a lot of big money in real estate. And I don't mean in the terms of the equity and the potential profits of sellers or the price of homes. I don't mean that. I mean, like in terms of hedge funds and corporations that are very active in purchasing real estate in areas all across the United States.
Yep.
And in the areas that are affordable, those are the ones that get hit the hardest by large investment corporations because it's affordable. So their money goes further there. And now you're looking at a spot where this will make it harder for the average American home buyer to purchase a property, which then makes it easier for corporations like BlackRock and other mega investment firms to do what they want to do. They don't care about representation. They don't care. They
have deep pockets.
They don't care. Doesn't matter. We don't need. And we're gonna hire our own people to do our own thing, pay them whatever we're gonna pay them for, and it doesn't matter. So that's a whole nother thing that we barely touched upon. And if we did touch upon it, we'd need a whole nother freaking hour, which but that's just another kind of thing that could be a potential issue. And that's why I agree with you. I think in 3 to 4 years, we're going to do another 180 and we could very likely end up back in a very similar spot, which is why I personally think that a large majority of sellers probably will continue to offer buyer broker representation compensation.
I think what's going to happen is that, the agents again, that educate the sellers and truly explain to them what their options are. If you do it this way, this is going to happen. If you do it that way, that potential, what are the outcomes of going down the path of no versus yes versus some, and really, really understanding what, really explaining to them about what it is. I truly believe that it's not going to be an overnight change. I don't think all of a sudden there's going to be people out like, all of a sudden the market's going to come to a standstill or whatever, or go in the opposite direction. I don't think there's going to be any major changes, in that regard. But the level of professionalism, I do think there's going to be a lot of change up in our industry. I think a lot of agents are going to get out. That's fine by me. That's fine by me. I not that a lot of agents in general bother me. I don't. There's plenty of real estate to go around, and go right at it. You do it. What bothers me is that lack of professionalism. Like I'm just done with the agents that make us. I mean, people hate us in general as an industry.
Used car salesperson, real estate agent.
Real estate agents are like
right there. And in third place is lawyers.
They're going to take advantage of you. You look in the movies and you see how real estate agents are depicted in the movies. It's just gross.
Oh God. And then we can't get on this just because but like the whole like reality TV show of Selling Sunset Million, all these things where it's just like, I'm going to go out and have 3 martinis with my client, take a phone call, and then boom, there's my commission on the bottom screen. You're just like,
yep.
No, it's just not
like this is reality. The way it is. It's hard. It's grueling. I've been at this for, like I said, it'll be in June. It'll be 28 years. Okay. I've done nothing else for 28 years. I have never had a guaranteed paycheck.
Yeah.
For 28 years, I've never had a guarantee that I'm going to get paid. I have 2 kids. I have a mortgage. I have, all the things. And what I do know is that if I continually work on sharpening my professionalism and I work on my trades and I focus on my relationship with my people and do the right thing, that then organically that business takes care of me. That organically you do the right thing and you get better at your craft. Then that will then the business does come. The business does come. And so the people that don't get that concept, the agents that don't get that concept, good riddance.
Yeah, I agree.
Good riddance. I think that, there's something else that I wanted to touch on that too, is that, there's so many facets. There's so many facets of this whole thing that, again, it goes so much deeper that, anyway, I don't want to get into it about in terms of how agents get leads and all this kind of stuff. It's like, the ramifications of this lawsuit, of this settlement, reaches way further than our industry.
It does. It's opening the door for other things, like you said. And honestly, it'll be really interesting to see where things are 3 months out from now, 6 months out from now, a year out from now. It'll just be really interesting to see what happens and to see how the industry handles it. Necessity
is the mother of invention.
It's true.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
It's true.
We will be seeing more things that pop up, changes in the industry. I can guarantee some things are going to happen that we're going to go, wow, that's actually really good.
Yeah.
Or different business models or things that we can't even fathom right now, like how VA FHA buyers are going to buy. Maybe they're going to, who knows?
Yeah.
But necessity is the mother of invention. Like it will, things will change. And you know what it was? We were due. We were overdue for something to happen. But it's crazy. Well, Joe, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Chatting with you in this very passionate conversation.
Yeah, it's been a good one.
Yeah, it was definitely a good one. And so I want to throw this up on the screen. So if anyone is wants to reach out to Joe, you can check out his YouTube channel.
Here I am.
You're over in Claremont, California. So if you're looking to buy or sell over in that area, look up Joe, and he'll take great care of you.
Yes.
We like to call him. We have a little networking group. We call him Handsome Joe. There you go.
Man.
Sorry, ladies, he's married.
Oh man!
But
Jen,
yeah,
thank you for having me. This has been
great.
fun.
This has been great. I have a feeling there will be a part 2.
Yes,
and
probably part 3 and 4 and 5, because there's still a lot more to go.
Yeah, I think this is just like, we're just skimming the surface. But again, if you're watching this, you have questions, post them in the comments. If you're looking for a referral that's not in Joe's neighborhood, but you're looking for, a good agent that, knows their stuff out in any other area, click the link in the description down below, and I'll reach out to you and get in touch with you and connect you with one of the many top agents that I do know, because I do know quite a bit of, quite a few top agents all over the country that I've kind of connected and made relationships with over the years. So, Joe, it was great chatting with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been excellent.
You got it. All right, everyone. Have a great day.